Jamie.
All right. So it's 7:30. Welcome everybody. I'm in Sandfly. It's I was thinking yesterday was my last day teaching in this space, but I'm here teaching this morning, so this is actually my last day teaching in the space. Um, so what I want to put into our practice today is non-attachment. Big surprise. Yesterday I listened to this really powerful talk by somebody I found on Insight Timer. I don't know if his real name is Seth Monk, but that's his Insight Timer name. And he's been studying and practicing and I guess teaching Buddhism for a long time. And he spoke around Anicca, which I've mentioned in this kind of Sunday morning practice before. And he spoke of it in a way that really landed for me yesterday. So this word Anicca, which is spelled in English A-N-I-C-C-A, is typically translated as like a letting go or an impermanence. And the way he described it actually was not dependability. So in Pali, when you put a in front of a word, it means not. And the word Nicca means permanent, constant, or dependable. And so this concept of Anicca is basically instructing us that things are not permanent, which I think we get. I mean, it's pretty easy to intellectually kind of get our heads around that, but when he described it as not dependability, there's like this, oh, like I really like things to be dependable. Our mission statement for Savannah Power Yoga has the word consistent in it, right? It's like we come, we know what to expect, and we can rely on it, and it's kind of dependable. And not dependability is something that's disturbing. So the other thing that we learn in Buddhism is life is dukkha. So this word dukkha most often is translated as suffering. But when you start to study it and really listen to people that have gone deep into these practices and this kind of inquiry around suffering, really suffering is not a good translation. And so there's a lot of kind of Buddhist scholars and practitioners who talk about, well, how do we really describe dukkha in English? Because it doesn't translate directly. And the way this gentleman described it, that really worked for me, was not satisfactory. Right, so it's something is not satisfying or we don't find it satisfactory. That's what's happening. Right, so it doesn't necessarily mean that we're in grief or in pain when dukkha exists. It means that we're not satisfied with things. And kind of like wanting things to be dependable, I think we also want to be satisfied. So, you know, when a Buddhist says life is suffering, a lot of people are like, well, I can't buy into that because it's super negative. But if we think of it as life is not satisfying, it's pretty true. Right? And the nature of being is constant change. Right, so this morning I drove through Cutter's Point to get some mate, and they weren't open because it's Sunday. And there was this like little moment where I was like, unsatisfied. Right? I wasn't suffering, but I was just like, that's not how I wanted it to be. And like just right in that moment, I saw it come up and I was like, oh, haha, like this is suffering. If we want to call it suffering. And I'm just disappointed. And I love that I have these tools now to actually in the moment see it when I have that reaction and go, yeah, there it is again. Like I want things to be my way or I'm not okay. And then once we recognize that, we can smile and move on. And that's not to say that everything that's unsatisfying is easy to just smile at and move on. Like Marcia broke her wrist, right? It's hard to smile at that and be like, okay, whatever, no big deal. Because it is a big deal. It's going to change your life for weeks. And it's going to force you to do things differently, not the way you want to. Right? You can't even brush your teeth with your normal hand.
Oh.
And that's unsatisfactory for most of us. Like just the little things. So, for me, like the realization of late is that this is a universal truth, that things are always changing. And the breath is just, it's a perfect example of that, right? So we breathe in, and every inhalation has to be followed by an exhalation, right? There's a letting go with every single breath. And that's pretty much how life goes, right? Every moment of the day, something is changing. Time is moving on, and we're just in a constant state of flux. It might seem like things are stable, but when we get used to that, something happens. So if we can get comfortable with that, then we don't find things as unsatisfactory. I'm trying to avoid using the word suffer. The other thing that he spoke about, just like as a really glaring example of this, is death and dying. All right, we actually know this. We know that everything has a cycle, and all life begins, has a middle, and has an ending. All right, whether it's a plant or a human or an animal, like we know this, and yet it's very unsatisfactory to us. And so the practice of being in this knowing is part of how we get comfortable with things that are unsatisfactory. So just something to think about. I'm not going to lead us in a death and dying meditation today, but it's, it's just like the ultimate reality. And I say this often, I do this practice so that I die a good death, right? That I'm not feeling unsatisfactory at the end. That there's like, oh, yep, here it comes. Whether it's in an instant or it's months and years that it takes for it to slowly happen, this is the practice for me that I'm hoping will ease that path. And it just starts with the breath, right? One breath at a time. So I'm going to invite you to take your seat. Physically, metaphorically. And close your eyes. So there are meditation practices where you keep your eyes open, and you're totally welcome to do that if that feels safer. Or just more satisfactory. All right, check in with your foundation. Your seat, your legs, maybe your feet. And then be intentional with your hands. Do something that you've created, and it's not just mindless, it's mindful. Notice your posture. If there's some dis-ease, create some ease. And then bring your attention to your breath. Notice the new breath as it comes in. And notice it letting go. Notice how your body responds to your breath. The movement of your chest, your belly. There's change, movement. There's like a cycle, a beginning, a process, the breath goes out, and it begins again. Been thinking of the breath as a metaphor for the cycle of life. So even as we breathe out and let go, it's not an ending. It moves right into a new beginning. A flower starts as a tiny seed. And it interacts with dirt, water, temperature. grows roots and a stem. It gathers nutrients from its surroundings. And eventually grows into a bud and blooms. And then eventually the petals fall back to the earth. And the process of decomposition takes the petals back into creation. It's hard to really even know where it begins. Right, it's a process, a cycling. We can name the beginning of the breath as the inhalation. But that's just our construct. It's really just our way of labeling and understanding something that's a process. We are change. holding on is unsatisfactory making. When I give up trying to stop the process, stop resisting, it's like a relief, it's freedom in just allowing the process to unfold. Take a fuller, bigger breath. Do that again, a nice big breath. You can open your eyes when you're ready. I hope in your unsatisfactory moments today, you can half smile. Just a half smile. You don't have to like it. Just like a little half smile. Namaste.